All right, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the council at this time? All right, given the nature of the many comments relative to crime and the community discussion that's going on, I'm going to take the liberty of asking city staff to report on what we're actually doing in the city of Stockton, some of the actions and activities that are taking place. The press and both print and media fail to report when they report what's happening in terms of crime prevention and crime activities. I'd like very much to first introduce the city manager, who will then ask the police chief to report. But I think it's important that the community recognize that we are working very hard to address our situation with the resources that we have, and we have had some successes. And it's important to talk about that. So Mr. Dice, please.
Sure. I'm going to ask the police chief to come up here in a second. I wrote some notes. I think there's some misunderstanding. Hopefully we can clarify today. I heard a comment about we need to use some common sense about dealing with crime, and I think we have been doing exactly that, and I think the police chief will speak to that. We need to implement something now. Well, we've been implementing aggressive programs to deal with crime, and the chief will speak to that. Crime needs to be a top priority. I think that has been clear on the part of the council. 80% of the general fund is police and fire. There was not one police officer cut this year in this year's budget, while you had to hit a $37 million cost reduction. Not one police officer was reduced. That's a priority. In fact, we're going to be adding 17 police officers as a result of the grant. The last thing boggles my mind, and it's clear that there's two parties talking together. Mr. Sanchez, we referenced to a conversation I had September 2010. With all due respect to Mr. Sanchez, he's totally mischaracterizing any conversation he had with me. If you recall, I've been on the job for 3 months. I'm not in any position to start talking about a citizen who's talking about Stockton and their experience, and talking about the so-called Marshall Plan in September 2010. You recall us comparing, sharing ideas about the future of Stockton, and clearly Mr. Sanchez has shared that with this other group, because they made some comment about we've been working on this plan for 15 months, which is entirely inaccurate. So those are some initial comments, but I want to ask the chief to speak to what is he doing now, what are the common sense approaches with regarding the crime issue.
Thank you. Chief Ulrich, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It concerns us all, but obviously concerns me as the police chief, the rest of our department. Our primary violent crime efforts are identification, targeting, disruption, arrest, prosecution of the worst criminals responsible for violent crime in this city that have driven us to the levels we just haven't seen before. We target hotspots throughout the city and try and deploy personnel to those locations as quickly as possible, given them the resource challenges that we face. Fundamental to this effort, though, is the use of innovative technologies, things like our Crime Information Center, computer-generated reports that help us figure out where to go and when to go and how quickly we can respond to those. Partnerships with federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as many other collaborative efforts, continue to be ongoing. We have officers in task force environments, whether it's narcotics, gangs, the FBI task force, the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They're task force that help us to generate additional assistance when we really need it. Our current strategy dictates applying technology to identify those hotspots, put the cops on dots, and put us where we can respond when we have the ability to do so. Investigate and arrest violent offenders and try and prosecute crime. Through lessons learned from past collaborative efforts, the Stockton Police Department recognizes that federal, state, and local law enforcement efforts to help combat violent crime and gang-related problems If we can effectively multiply our efforts through an influx of resources and experience, we might have some successes. Once again, given the resource allocations that we have, we've got to look to other resources to assist us. We work with several entities now, the Sheriff's Department, California Highway Patrol, the U.S. Marshal's Office, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General. We've had conversations and collaborations with them, bringing as many as 50 and 60 officers here at a time to assist us on when they possibly can. They are recognizing the need in Stockton as well, and they're trying. Unfortunately, those crime spikes are going up. As we continue to work on collaborative efforts, we will work towards that end. I think one of the priorities is trying to figure out how do we bring staffing back to a city that needs it so much. When Dr. Anthony Baraga from Harvard came, he said, for a city's needs, like Stockton, we need 550 police officers, not 318 like we have today. So we have deployed, we've restructured the department in the most efficient manner possible. We're responding as quickly as we can to the many emergencies that we do have, and we are collaborating with every organization that possibly can come and assist us at this time. So I want to assure the citizens the Stockton Police Department is here to help. We're working diligently around the clock, 24 hours a day, to try and help ebb these spikes in violence and crime. Although in a city like Stockton, it's going to take much more than just a police department. You can't ask the police department to take care of all the ills of this community. We've had those problems for quite some time. So I just wanted to add those very few things because I want people to know we are working, we are doing what we can do. Realistically, the people in the city have to realize we do have to have more personnel at some point to be able to adequately police the city. How we get there and how we do that, let's work.
Chief, can you tell us what some of the successes have been in the last few months with the collaborative efforts in terms of what you've been able to accomplish on the street, working with whether it's the Marshal's Office or the Attorney General? Tell us about some of those and the results of those.
Sure. We continue to put together task force mentalities, if you will. Bring as many of those resources together so that we can do top 10 lists. We figure out who are the top 10 worst offenders in the city. We go after them. We're using technology to try and track people to give us an advantage of trying to find out crime before it occurs. We've dismantled some of the local street gangs because of the violence and taken many of them to court and prosecuted them and put them away in prison.
And really zeroed in on those folks and helped clean that up. So what you say about cops on dots, you obviously practice by putting your police resources in those areas. So, that's critical, and that, the community needs to know that the technology is there. You know where the crime is happening and can use the force to go in and do the kinds of activities that change the environment within a particular neighborhood or community.
You're absolutely right. Our ability to put people in neighborhoods and to sustain that is ultimately important. Our ability to go into like the Park Street area, we can do that. Pulling together our resources and going to locations and driving that crime. Our ability to sustain that is why we're where we are now. The ability to keep officers in those areas for an extended period of time, to keep officers in parks and around schools and all the places that we're every day. That's hampered because all we are now is responding to calls for service. We're going to call.
All right, Councilmember Councilman Coleman has a question.
Hi, Chief. I just wanted to commend the police department on what it's doing with the resources that it does have. But in that light, I see that, and you said it, where you said that you guys are able to target certain areas and bring your resources in, and you can make a difference there. But sustaining that difference over a long period of time, you have to move to other places, and you don't have the manpower to come in behind you. But there have been citizens that have stood at the podium today, and they talked about my house was robbed, and then my neighbor's house was robbed a week earlier. There's a difference in that, there's a robbery and then there's a burglary. You know, robbery is a violent offense. I think in most of those instances, it was probably a burglary, which is a felony theft. So, but what I'm saying about that is that there are some things that we can do as citizens to help on the prevention side. You know, there's education that we can learn how to, you know, lock our doors, get certain things, get locks, get dogs, get, you know, a neighborhood watch where you're watching all the what's going on in your neighborhood. Those kinds of things can help the police department do their job better by being the eyes and ears in your neighborhood. Nobody knows when something's out of place better than the person that lives there every day as they look and interact with their neighbors. So one of the things I think that we're doing with the neighborhood, the crime prevention and the neighborhood improvement committee is we're going to be putting together, we're collaborating with your office to put together a sort of a seminar type meeting where we'll be able to talk to the public and help them in certain areas as to how to prevent them being a victim of crime, so to speak. I mean, it's kind of hard to patrol and prevent homicide. Homicide is something that happens when it happens, but to be able to put your resources on people that are more likely to cause that kind of crime is what's going to help drive that statistic down. But there are things that people can do to help themselves lower their probability of